you might as well do it now because it's easier now than it's going to be when you're older, because it is harder to get a job when you're older.
That's the wisdom right there.
Welcome to Life Unleashed,
The podcast all about creating the best life for you and your furry best friend.
If you're a dog mom on the go, juggling life, work, and the endless joys of being a dog parent, then you're in the right place. I'm Dani.
And I'm Nick.
And together with the incredible dog mom community from Tails Up Pup, we're here to share advice, stories, and the obsession we have over the love for our dogs.
Get ready to laugh, learn, and lean on each other because life with your dog just got even more awesome.
Another day, another podcast.
I have a prediction.
What?
I believe that our 30s are going to be better than our 20s.
Oh, snap. Is that controversial? I feel like no.
I don't know. You hear so many people talk about how your 20s are your best time of your life. College is literally the best 4 years of your entire life. I feel like we heard that a lot growing up.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's almost like social media and the comparison thing, people catch on to something and everyone says it, and I'm like, is it true? Or everyone has a different experience, so I'm sure it's true for some people, but for us, college was not our best years, even just this far out, and we're excited for the future because we feel like the next 10 years are going to be even better than the last 10 years. And it's so crazy because so much good things did happen in the last 10 years for us. We met, and yes, we met in college, so that was a great thing that came out of college. But there is, I don't know, I just feel like so many, even adults though will say oh, college is the best time, you're only young once, live it up, you get to do all these things. I feel like the reason behind them saying that is that you can do things that are acceptable in those years that aren't as acceptable when you're older. For example, going out and getting drunk. If you want to do that when you're 40s, it's much more frowned upon than in college where it's socially acceptable to do that.
I think it is really more about the lack of responsibility that you have in college versus as you get older. Now, this is obviously not for everyone. I'm talking in more general terms. I feel like in general, when you're 20 years old, 19 years old in college, you have a lot less responsibility than you have when you're 35-year-old with 2 kids.
For sure. And even between the two of us, we had 2 different experiences. I worked in college, you didn't. So I had more responsibilities in having to pay for more things at that age. But overall, compared to the real world and after college, you have a lot more responsibilities. You get a house, you have payments, you have to pay for a car, all of that stuff.
I mean, I even, catch myself when I'm talking to college students saying things like enjoy it now, things like this, because you really never can go back to that, little amount of responsibility, but that doesn't mean it's actually better.
Feel in the moment, I felt almost like a failure in college because I wasn't enjoying it in that moment. And I feel like it was some of the worst years of my life because comparing to every part of life that I've lived so far, that was my least favorite part. I enjoyed high school. I enjoyed elementary school. Having a routine and being at home and having your friends was really easy and nice. And I lived a good life. And then you move off to college where I didn't enjoy partying. I didn't enjoy drinking, and it was hard to meet people. And you live in a new place. You have to figure out where everything is. You're independent, all these things adding up. It just wasn't my favorite time. I feel like I learned a lot about myself and I became more independent, and I'm glad that I did it. I don't regret going to college, but of everything I've experienced, that has been my least favorite part of life.
I think it's just a really hard time of life because there's so many firsts that are happening. You're literally having to become an adult more or less in that time period. I think that's why college, and I would say the few years after college, are so tough. Probably the few years after college are definitely tougher than the years in college because that's when you're coming out and you're having your first full-time job. You're truly, fully living on your own, those types of things. But that all starts, when you have to move away and go. If you do move away and go to college, maybe it's a different experience if you're living at home during college and things like that. But for the experience that I had, you move away, you go to Alabama. And it's all this brand new stuff, brand new state. You pretty much knew no one, and you're having to figure out all this stuff. But by its very nature, it's a transient period of life. It's just for that little 4-year stint, and it's going to be over. It's not like you're making roots there where you're going to stay forever. It's just this little time snapshot of your life, and then it's over.
So for you in college, you knew you were never planning to stay in that town or that area?
Yeah, definitely not.
How did you know that?
Well, I figured that I wasn't going to search for a job there. Like after college, I wanted to move back like to kind of where I was from, which is the Atlanta area. And so I wasn't trying to stay there.
Yeah, same. But it's like weird to think about. It's like you could have, like, it just didn't really seem like an option to us.
And I think kind of what you had said is like, elementary school, middle school, high school, unless your parents move you around, it's like that's home,
you know everything, you know where things are, you know all the people, like you feel safe, like it just, everything.
Right. Where in college, there's a lot of unknowns, but it's not even just unknowns to where it's like, oh, once I figure this out, I'll have it down. I'm going to figure this out, but then I'm leaving in 4 years.
I also feel like I never related to the people who were obsessed with their school. Like even these very grown adults who still are diehard fans of their school, like I personally don't get it. Like school was school for me. I, enjoyed it enough. I don't hate my school, but I don't walk around like flaunting how much I'm obsessed with it. I just don't relate to that.
I think sometimes it's like maybe, a way to party and to hang out and, celebrate, bond. Yeah. It's just a very, like Roll Tide, like us all get together and watch football, or Go Dogs, let's get together and watch football.
And like with Alabama, people always like assume that you hate Auburn, and it's like they didn't do anything to me, like
yeah, maybe if you grew up in Alabama and grew up an Alabama fan, maybe you'd hate them, but I certainly don't.
Yeah, I just feel like there's all these different expectations and what people make it out to be, and that just wasn't it for me. And I think that my 30s will be way better than my 20s. And like I said, reflecting on our 20s, we met, we started a business, we got married, we have our dogs, like we're gonna have a baby before I turn 30. But I feel like 30s is gonna be so much better, and it's still so unknown. It's not like we have these grand plans to make it our best. It's just the people that I know who are thriving, who are a step ahead of us, all are living their best moments in their 30s. And I just think that that's going to be us. And I will say that you and I have a much more older soul, but I don't think that impacts how we are feeling about these 30s being our thriving years. I think so many people do who still enjoy like going out, partying, like they can still thrive in their 30s as well.
I think that too, part of your 20s is a hard time, particularly your early 20s, like right when you come out, like I said, you're getting your first job. And then by the time you're mid to late 20s, you might have switched jobs once or twice. And you're kind of like now, at least society tells you, you should be kind of falling into a career path. I also think that like your 20s is a really difficult time because particularly by your mid 20s, society tells you that you should have your career kind of figured out, or at least the path of your career. And if you are someone that didn't like your first job or don't feel like you have that figured out, you kind of might feel lost, and it's just a really difficult time.
Well, it's so hard because most people spend a lot of money on their schooling, and you get out of the college, and you have to start paying for it. So you feel like you need a good enough job to pay back some of your loans. And now more than ever, life is so expensive. It is nearly impossible to have all the things that you want or that society tells you should have when you get out of college. You're likely not buying a house right out of college, but even having an apartment is so expensive these days. And having enough money to do the things you want to do and go out and have fun and, go to a concert and then also have to pay your loans back. It's like, it is so hard. And in reality, you're not going to get your dream job out of college. You feel like you should because you spend all this time going to school, getting good grades, graduating, and then all of a sudden you have to start at the bottom. And it's kind of like, we were even talking about this the other day, when you jump from elementary school to middle school to high school, in fifth grade are at the top of the school. You're like the coolest of the school. And then you go into sixth grade at middle school, you start back at the bottom. Then you're in eighth grade, top of the school again. But then you go to ninth grade, bottom again. Then when you're graduating high school, you're the kings and queens of the school. But then same thing basically is when you leave college, you're leaving feeling like you're high and mighty and accomplished. And then you have to start at the bottom of the totem pole to get a job, to get your foot in the door, to get experience. So many jobs that I was looking at out of college said you needed to have 5 years experience. And I'm like, how am I supposed to have this when I just graduated?
And the difference between going from like all the different grades that you were just talking about versus coming out to your first job is all of those you kind of just end up progressing to like the next stage. But I think a lot of people, they come out, they get that first job, say 2, 3, 4 years or whatever, and then maybe that's not the field that they want to stay in, so they don't really want to go start over again. I think at that point you're tired of like having to start over. You're like, I don't want to make a pivot or anything like that because I feel like I'm having to go backwards. And maybe like, I don't know, the other stuff in life is you're following a kind of a linear trajectory. It's like elementary, middle, high school, college, work. But then if you have to take a step backwards after that, you're like, oh, I'm going backwards. I don't want to have to start a new career. And that can be really scary.
I feel like the main thing I am trying to get across is like that when you're entering your 30s, you feel like you have to be established. You feel like you have to have this dream job and this perfect job and this high paying job. And if you're not there, that's okay. And that's actually normal, even though society or social media may not tell you that. And it's okay to pivot, to find a new job, to completely have a whole new career path starting in your 30s, because really when you look at how long you're going to live, your life is just beginning.
Yeah, worse at 30, you're still really young. If you're 28, 29, 30, even 35, you're still really young in the grand scheme of things. And if you're like, I want to do a pivot in my career path, you still have so much time.
And if you stay in something you're not happy with now, and let's say you suffer the next 10 years because you felt like you had to, it's going to be harder to start over when you're 40. You might as well do it now because it's easier now than it's going to be when you're older, because it is harder to get a job when you're older.
That's the wisdom right there. It's easier now
than it will
ever be. But
now's your time.
But why is it so hard to listen to that advice?
Because it is scary. It's like jumping off of a cliff, essentially, because there is so much unknown. If you're completely changing career paths, you don't know anything. Like, you truly don't know if you're going to like it or not. You think you're going to like it, just like you thought you were going to like this other job. You don't know. There's no way to really know until you try it. Sometimes you might have to go back for more schooling. Something that I was looking into was like being a teacher, and I don't have a degree in education. So what would that entail? And, if I I wasn't looking at that now before we started Tales Up Pup, but if I were to do that, you'd have to weigh the pros and cons. Is it worth me going to get these certificates to go get this job that I think I might like, but I don't really know? There's just a lot of risk in the game, but the only way to know is try.
And I'm sure with those things, a lot of times if it involves more schooling, most of us already, like you said, spent a fair amount on schooling. Do you want to really go spend more money on additional schooling for a new career? It's a high hurdle to jump over.
Something that I did that I would recommend other people doing if you're thinking about switching jobs is to look up YouTube videos on like either reviews of people who had that job or what that job might entail, and doing your research, because that's actually what swayed me not to take the job from Amazon, because there were so many people saying the working conditions were bad, and like maybe my life would be so different if I did it. Who knows? For some people it would have been a great job, but for me it just wasn't the right job. I'm glad I didn't take it, but I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't put the time in to research it.
Another thing that you can do that I really wish I would have done like early on is you can shadow people. You can probably find someone in your network that has that job, a certain job that you're interested in.
Or even just pick their brain about it.
Right, pick their brain about it. And then, if you're still interested, be like, hey, is it possible if I could, literally shadow you one day at work or whatever, to kind of like just see what that's like. I feel like a lot of people would say yes, certainly would say yes to a pick your brain about, the day-to-day life of it. Because I think a lot of kids, and I know I was this way, you're planning to getting this degree for a career path that you actually may know very little bit about the actual working day-to-day life.
That's what's wild is they expect you to go and get this degree starting when you're like 18 and you don't know. You don't know what you want. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what the reality of that job is like. It's so crazy that they expect us to pick that when we're so young. I don't know why it is that way, but it is. And it can be really scary to try to change your mind later, but to be honest, a lot of people do.
I think it's really good advice, though, what you said. What was the exact phrase? It's
The
never,
time is now.
The time is now. It's never going to be easier.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to take to heart. But I think if you kind of play out that thought experiment for whatever your situation is, you probably will find your mind is going to come up with a lot of excuses on why it's harder now. But if you actually sit down and think about it, I think you'll actually come to find out, you know what, maybe it's not actually harder now. Maybe it's going to be harder in the future. And I think one of the biggest things, at least for me, that I've always been the most scared about is regret. I do not want to look back in my life and regret that I didn't try something. And this does not all have to be about starting your own business or doing. This is literally any career or job that you're considering doing. I don't want to regret not having, tried this job or, just made whatever that decision is that you're.
I feel like that's where we differ even now. Is like you still have regret about decisions we've made, where I think it wasn't a regret because I've learned from it. I wouldn't know what I know now if I hadn't made those mistakes. So regret is a really hard thing because you usually learn something from it. You learned you didn't want to do it. You learned maybe you want to do this other thing. So you can use it as a tool.
I don't have regret from our decisions, but those decisions still sting.
Yeah.
The mistakes sting still.
The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking about these decisions is also marriage. So many people, and this will depend on where you live, I feel like, but so many people entering their 30s feel like they need to be married because they're getting too old. And like, if you want to have kids, then you kind of do have a little bit of a clock on you, depending on how you want to conceive those kids. But no, my piece of advice for if you are not in a relationship and you want to be and you feel like time is running out, I have two pieces of advice. One, work on yourself. Focus on what makes you happy, how you can truly love who you are, because you can't love someone else if you don't love yourself.
It definitely starts with self-love.
And just really making sure you're the best version of yourself that you can be. What are you going to be giving to the relationship? Why would someone else want to be in a relationship with you? I mean, at the end of the day, like that kind of sounds bad. I feel like as it's coming out of my mouth, like, what are you going to give? But at the end of the day, everyone needs to put something into a relationship to get something out. So I'm not saying like, what are you going to give monetarily? I'm saying like, what values, I don't know.
Well, I believe that all of us, no matter who you are, can always be, self-improvement. We can always be working on ourselves. There's a piece of each of us that we can always continually to improve on. And if you're doing that, you're going to be somebody that is, at minimum, if that right person doesn't come along, it's still going to benefit you to work on yourself.
Right.
And when Mr. Right or Mrs. Right comes along, you're going to be that more desirable person or whatever, because you've put in all the work and effort to make yourself the best version of who you can be. And, then it will probably be more likely for you guys to, be able to get together.
My other piece of advice is to figure out, like, are you putting in the work really is the main idea. What are you doing to find that person? If you're just sitting at home, like they're not going to come knock on your door, and I hope they don't, because that'd be creepy. But like, where are you going to find, like, what values or what interest does that person have? If it is a Christian person, are you attending church to go find someone? Like, that's where you're probably going to meet someone who's Christian. If you want someone who likes going out to the bar, then maybe you should attend the bar to find someone. Like, go to the places where people of those interests who have those values that you're looking for are. And
you got to be out there living your life with open eyes to run into the person.
You can do that on the dating apps. I'm not saying that doesn't work, because it definitely works for some people. You just have to utilize them in the right way. Make sure that it's clear what you're looking for and that you're talking to people. And I mean, maybe you need to come up with like questions to figure out, quickly, is this person have the same interests as me or the same values? But just know that you're not too old for a relationship, and you can do it.
Well, and I think sometimes patience is a really important thing. The timing is going to be right when it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Because I know for me, when I was the hardest looking out there for a girlfriend and things like that, I spent looking for a girlfriend for like a full year, and like no one came along. I went on a lot of dates, and it was like there's no one out there for me. Is kind of how I felt at the end of that. And I was like actively pursuing that, doing everything you were saying, putting myself out there, going to places like for people that I wanted to meet, all this stuff. And I was not coming along with anybody that I thought, well, this is someone that I could be with. And it was really as soon as I said, you know what you just said, I'm going to work on myself. I'm going to, not really be actively, looking for someone per se, but I'm not going to be closed-minded to it. And I'm just going to go about, becoming the best version of myself. That's literally when we met, more or less.
Yeah.
Not long after that.
I know that we are just entering our 30s. This is mostly hypothetical of what we are hopeful for to come, but we have friends and family who have led the way and shown us that 30s can be the best years of your life, and life's what you make it. You got to have a positive attitude. You got to be excited for the future and find the things that you enjoy doing. And I feel like a lot of people too, entering your 30s, feel like you don't have hobbies or like things that you enjoy doing. So finding those, you can even YouTube like fun hobbies to have and get some inspiration.
A lot of what we've talked about has to do with our experience so far through our 20s. So I definitely think that we can speak on that, but it is a little bit difficult to think, all right, what are our 30s going to be like? But as we literally are just entering them, kind of knowing what it seems like coming down the pipeline, I guess you could say, it's like I'm so excited for those things. Like I'm so excited to, start a family. I know in a lot of ways we're kind of maybe more settling down. I do think another thing that happens as you get older, this may happen for some people in their 40s, but you really start to figure out maybe around 25 or 26, at least for me, who you really are. You start to the deep core values, all of that stuff. I feel like that really is established at that time. And once you had talked about self-love earlier, it's really hard to love yourself if you don't know even who you are. And so I think as you move into your 30s, you've been established as who you are. You're able to kind of just look, forward to all the things, to come. Another thing that I think is a little bit counterintuitive about what I'm expecting for the 30s is we're going to have a lot more responsibilities. And to me, I would think, at least society seems to tell us, that the more responsibilities you have, like the less fun that you can have and the, harder that your life is going to be. But it actually seems like, from what I'm expecting, that even though we're going to be getting more responsibilities, I think there's going to be a lot of fulfillment that comes along with that. Like, of course, being a dad or a mom, is way more responsibility than, when it was just, Danielle and I. But I think there's going to be a lot of joy and benefits that come with that additional responsibility.
It's kind of like people who are bored at home and don't have a lot of things to do. They don't feel like they're being fulfilled. Like, we're going to feel so fulfilled because we're going to have so many things going on, and we're pouring our love into someone else now. And so that's going to fulfill us in a different way than we are used to.
Yeah. And I think even everyone probably hates, I continue to use over all of these podcasts, like the dogs versus the kids. But even when you're in a relationship, then you get married, there is definitely more responsibility that comes along with marriage. Now you have made, a commitment to each other, a public commitment, and there's more responsibility with that. But I do think there's more joy that comes out of marriage. Then if you get dogs, like what we did, there, of course, is more responsibilities. Now you have to take care of these animals, but we actually have gotten more joy out of that. And then, of course, maybe the top of it is kids, having kids and being responsible as mom and dad. You have the ultimate responsibility there, but you are actually at each stage of that getting more and more fulfillment, which is, I don't know, it seems backwards, but maybe it
makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah. It makes sense in my heart. I just feel like it's backwards in the sense of what you kind of, I don't know, maybe society tells us.
Yeah.
In a society that tells you to only care about yourself, these things would be taken away from all the options that you'd have and what you could do for yourself. But I think as people deep down, we're meant to have these responsibilities, and this is what we're, kind of designed to do. And, you do get a lot of fulfillment out of this stuff.
Yeah. It gives you a purpose in life.
Yeah. And sometimes a purpose requires sacrifice and hard things. It's, in a way, another interesting analogy here, but it's kind of like working out. Like, obviously, it is much easier and nicer to sit on the couch and watch a TV show than it is to, get up early in the morning, go work out, put yourself through, a hard, grueling thing where you're sweating, out of breath, all of that stuff. But at the end of that, even though it was so hard, which one do you feel better at? Do you feel better after the end of a movie, or do you feel better after, a hard workout?
Definitely a hard workout for me.
No, I mean, me too. But it seems, again, it's kind of like you got to put in the work to get the. You know what? Is when you work really hard at something, and this is definitely true for me, you're proud of yourself at the end of it, and you feel more fulfilled.
Well, there you heard it. Work hard, feel the reward, and don't
run away from responsibility. Responsibility is a good thing. It's fulfilling, like you said.
Yeah, it definitely is hard, but then it is worth it in the end.
I'm so excited for the next chapter. Danielle honestly isn't even 30 yet, so she's got a little bit longer in her 20s. Soak it up, Dani, because 30's coming for you.
It's coming, but not for a few more months, so we can enjoy our 20s while we still have it. Thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye. Bye.